I'm John Batchelor. My colleague, Larry Kudlow, co-host and friend, continues with me. Kudlow reports at CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. And we welcome John Taylor, professor of economics at Stanford University, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, former Treasury Undersecretary for International Affairs, who has a new piece up. I recommend it to you all at the Hoover Institution in Defining Ideas, and as a link on my site if you can find the short route, because Mr. Taylor is addressing a new, fresh idea from those who support stimulus from the government, the Keynesians. But 21st century Keynesians are clever. And one of them, Larry Summers, has come up with a term, or he and his colleagues have, called secular stagnation. Secular stagnation. That's right. Why I say it twice is because immediately the mind sort of melts. It doesn't seem to make an immediate amount of sense, but it's an excuse. That's what it is. Professor, a very good evening to you. Secular stagnation. What is it, and what is it explaining, or, in my interpretation, excusing? Good evening to you.
Yes, it's excusing or trying to explain, I think inadequately, why the economy has recovered very slowly from this bad crisis we had a few years ago, why we had the crisis. It's basically a big explanation, and it says that there's been some force out there that has made business investment more difficult, less attractive, and government needs to come in and fix that. So it's quite a story, I have to say. I've criticized it and called it hokum, but that's the idea.
John, isn't it a kind of rationale that the Keynesianism, which reared its ugly head in this cycle, failed? That, let's say, big government stimulus from spending, and even big Federal Reserve stimulus from increasing the monetary base, that this stuff just didn't work. And so now they're trying to blame this on some, I don't know, surreal, supernatural, long-term cycle. That no matter what we do, it wouldn't work. But it's an excuse, isn't it?
I think it is. That's why I read it. I agree that they're looking at the stimulus packages and the other interventionist policies, and they thought they were going to work. They didn't work. And so now they say, hey, there's this other factor out there that's dragging down confidence, dragging down investment. I think what's dragging it down is these very erratic policies and the lack of tax reform, not dealing with the budget successfully, all that uncertainty, which has been the factor. And they rarely list, in fact, never list those issues at all.
I mean, I think a lot of of course, I totally agree. A lot of these businesses sitting on piles of cash, and very profitable. Now, a lot of that cash is overseas because we haven't had tax reform to bring it home. But I think, John, they're afraid to make long-term investments because things are so helter-skelter in the government, you don't know which way they're going to turn, which is to say who they're going to regulate or tax next, and that includes Obamacare, and therefore they don't really feel, they'll produce in order to meet, they'll create production in order to meet short-term demand, but they don't want to build long-term plant and equipment and warehouses and stuff because they're just not confident that they can have a stable regime that will allow them to be profitable without government interference.
That's what the evidence shows. That's what they say, which is awfully important. You've got a lot of evidence of an increase in uncertainty, that you can see the policies much different than we had in good times like the 80s and much of the 90s. So, yeah, I think there's a pretty clear explanation for what's going on, and that is this uncertainty about policy and the erratic nature of it, and the failure to address some of the long-term issues like the tax reform and entitlement reform. And of course, there's evidence the regulations have increased a lot in certain areas, financial sector, Dodd-Frank. So there's a lot of things I talk about all the time that explains why we're not doing better. I don't need these excuses, but you can see they come forward because people don't like those explanations. They want to look for something else.
John, if I understand the presentation of secular stagnationists, they're discouraged. They're almost in despair. This is fatalism. The technology innovation has run out. The population growth has run out. We're out of ideas. We've exhausted ourselves. We have a workforce that's growing older, that it's not skilled, it can't compete. So that what they're saying is give up. The reason we have such a slow recovery is because the only hope is for the government to bail us out. It's the dream of those who look to Superman in Washington. Do I read that correctly?
Well, I think there's a lot of pessimism in that view, a lot of sense that what are we going to do about it except do more of what has not worked before. At least people can see it hasn't worked. There's a fatalism to it. What's, I think, interesting is this kind of argument was made in the 1930s when things weren't working well.
Right.
Famous economist Alvin Hansen put the idea forward, was called secular stagnation, and it was same kind of ideas, not exactly, but it was proven wrong as we had this great post-World War II boom.
And John, there's another one coming down the road here. I watched Obama today with a little bit his news conference after the cabinet meeting. He's going to give a State of the Union that I think is going to have very heavy emphasis on inequality, okay, and sort of how to solve inequality, which, in my view, in the liberal world means, taxing corporations, taxing well-to-do people, taxing investment. They've already done quite a lot of that with or without Obamacare. But, inequality, John, I'd rather grow the pie larger than try to redistribute the income. And I think, unfortunately, they want to redistribute the income. And that's more government intervention. And that stuff has never worked, and it always backfires.
Yeah, I mean, this slow recovery has not helped people at the bottom. It's made things worse. And so if you want to really help people, which we all do, you need a faster growing economy. And the inequality argument is different from this secular stagnation, but they do go together in the sense they're calling for more government intervention when it hasn't worked recently. So I think they go together. It's important to point them out. And the inequality argument, I think in terms of inequality, there's a lot of things to do. There's a faster growing economy. There's more focus on K-12 education, which we can improve. We don't need to focus always on this redistribution issue.
I want to emphasize energy. Larry and I spoke of it earlier in the program, John, and you know the story very well. The energy revolution is remaking large parts of abandoned America. The Bakken played out parts of Texas oil, the oil bonanza of the 1930s and 40s, and we're approaching a point where we can see that we're going to become an energy exporter. It's creating jobs. Good heavens, they have signing bonuses for Burger Kings in the Bakken because there's such a demand for workers, for anybody who can drive a truck anywhere. And that story contravenes entirely the secular stagnation argument, because there is innovation, there is growth, and it's so large and so fast that it's actually helping the whole economy recover. How does Mr. Summers and his Keynesians respond to that?
They don't talk about it very much. That's why they tend to be pessimistic when this view is put forth. There's so much potential in this economy for the reasons you suggest. If businesses were given the freedom to make it work, and the extent that they're not, we're not going to reap those benefits. So I think there's lots of reasons to be optimistic. To me, the problem has been the policy. If we fix the policy, the economy will do much better. And the reasons are there's so much potential out there.
John, you know what I love about the energy boom, the whole fracking shale boom, is that predominantly Washington never saw it coming, right, and had nothing to do with it. And in fact, Obama initially tried to stop it until his own EPA finally signed off on it. And I want to add to that, you've had tremendous technological advances. For example, the social media revolution, all right? And a lot of that now is being used by businesses. In fact, business-to-business activity and hiring and jobs and so forth. And the other one, John, is biotechnology. You've had tremendous breakthroughs, and you've also got these entrepreneurs out there. We're doing this thing on CNBC. We're replaying the Shark Tank reality shows. So I had this woman on tonight who started a cake business, and she got $50,000 from Barbara Corcoran, the real estate person here in New York City, and they come on the show and they make a case to get investment for their ideas, and then they go. They're like little entrepreneurs. This woman sells cake over the internet, and it's a pretty thriving business. So what am I saying? The spirit is there, and the activity is there. It's just that on a grander scale, you just don't have that confidence that you can rely on anything because of all these interventions. I mean, that's what government had nothing to do with energy. Government had nothing to do with the social media. Government has nothing to do with the biotech. Government has nothing to do with this woman's cake business. That's what's so great about this.
Yeah. Well, you see that out here. I'm out in California, Silicon Valley, and you see it every day, and you know that government can't keep track of all those things, and even though they try, I think there's so much of that. Social media, actually, I think healthcare, there's a huge potential if the government would get out of the way. A lot of innovation in these sectors. So, yeah, that's the whole point. There's huge potential everywhere you go. I see it every day. We just got to let it get out.
And just a thought there about, Larry, that you were making the point about innovation, and I saw that cake segment tonight that you did talk to her. She represents a self-invented person. That's what she represents.
Yeah.
She wasn't talking about tax advantages or any kind of government intervention at all. It wasn't even part of the conversation.
No, you're exactly right. It's funny. I didn't go there because I knew that I'm not talking to somebody who has expertise in government. Basically, she starts this business. She and her mother have family recipes about cake and different kinds of cakes. And they start selling this stuff over the internet, and it just grows like topsy. So they needed some more investment. They didn't, what she got was $50,000 from Barbara Corcoran. So in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of money. My point is the spirit of entrepreneurship and the actions of entrepreneurship are very much alive. And I think that's great because eventually, as I said earlier, the voters are going to vote to stop this massive government intrusion. It's going to happen. We're going to see it in this November, and we'll probably see it again in 2016. And once that happens, you're just going to have a veritable explosion of entrepreneurship. It's just all bubbling up below the surface right now. That's the way I look at it.
Secular stagnation. If we Google that, will we find the long list preaching it, Mr. Taylor?
Hope you'll find me criticizing it.
Okay, yes, of course you will. The economic hokum, wonderful word, hokum of secular stagnation. John Taylor of the Hoover Institution. He teaches economics, professor of economics at Stanford University. John Taylor, writing most recently in Defining Ideas for the Hoover Institution. That's where you can read the blog. It was also published in the Wall Street Journal recently. Larry Kudlow of Kudlow Reports at CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. I'm John Batchelor.